Meeting is now being recorded.
So hello and good afternoon. Welcome to another of our monthly College to Career teleconference calls. On today's call, Lindsay Eigenauer will provide insights into the process of completing the application to be designated as a comprehensive transition and post-secondary education program. Before we get started, let's take a few minutes to learn who are with us on today's call. Please indicate your name, institution, and role with the college. Are you there?
Yeah, this is Amber Perez, Director at the Shasta College CTP.
Hi, Amber. Welcome.
And Jamie Rayborn, the job developer with Shasta College CTC.
Hello.
Hi.
We're doing introductions for those of you that just joined us. If you would, please indicate your name, institution, and role with the college.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Myers with the Fresno City College College to Career program. I'm the coordinator.
Hi, Tiffany.
Hi.
Hello, alongside, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say this is Janlyn Underwood calling from West Los Angeles College to Career program.
Hi, Janlyn, and congratulations again.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, this is Hugo Olagi with the College to Career program at Fresno City College.
Welcome, Hugo.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else joining us? All right. So as you may know, with the passage of the Higher Education Opportunities Act of 2008, the Congress constructed legislation that for the first time made provisions so that students with intellectual disabilities may be eligible for federal financial aid. As part of that legislation, individuals with intellectual disabilities were no longer required to have a high school diploma or to meet an ability to benefit test in order to participate in post-secondary education programs. The Higher Education Opportunities Act, or HEOA, did, however, set some parameters for participation in what we would refer to as inclusive post-secondary education, in that it spoke to individuals with intellectual disabilities being able to participate in college with peers without disabilities, and that was geared towards, or that would lead to, gainful employment. Now, this is of interest to College to Career because College to Career, for the most part, was predicated on HEOA, in that the Department of Rehab and the Chancellor's Office of the Community Colleges stipulated an expectation for participation of students with intellectual disabilities in non-credit and credit courses with peers without disabilities. Today, we are seeing that students with intellectual disabilities are participating in a range of courses that prior to C2C they did not have access to. Now, Lindsay is going to be providing us with today's training, and we have provided you with a number of materials or documents for today's call. Among the documents include application directions, the regulatory requirements, UCLA Pathways CTP, or Comprehensive Transition and Post-Secondary Education application, Santa Rosa Junior College outline as a model of what you could be projecting that your program would do as a CTP, as well as satisfactory academic progress, and last but not least, the PowerPoint for today's presentation. Lindsay has served as the coordinator of the College to Career program at Santa Rosa Junior College since its inception in 2011. She has led the program through 6 cohorts that has included 3 graduations and 37 successful job placements, which include all of the graduates of the first cohort that completed the program at Santa Rosa Junior College. Before assuming this current role, Ms. Eigenauer served as a classroom teacher and counselor in a residential treatment facility and was a substitute teacher in the K-12 system in the San Francisco Bay Area. Lindsay has earned a master's degree in special education and a credential in mild moderate special education and another credential focused on multiple subject teaching. Professionally, she is particularly interested in education reform and life skills. It brings me great pleasure today to welcome Lindsay to the phone as the presenter for today's presentation. And I'm going to ask, as she is presenting today, if you could submit questions if you have them either in the chat box or if you could just simply say, wait a minute, I have a question. Hopefully the call will be interactive. I did not take much time with the introductions, and I'm seeing that we have approximately 54 minutes. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lindsay.
Thank you, Will, for that introduction. So I'd like to focus my presentation today on what's not really included in the directions for the CTP application. So mostly what CTP is, the process before and after approval, a little bit about accreditation, who you need to talk to at your college, some tips for creating your proposal, and then I'll reference some of the sample applications that we sent out. But I'm not going to go into the details of what to include in your proposal too much, more about the process. So I hope that's okay. But I'm happy to answer any questions throughout, like Will said. So to start, the PowerPoint, from the very beginning, what is a comprehensive transition program? And I'll use CTP to mean either comprehensive transition program or comprehensive transition and post-secondary education program, like Will said. So what it is, it's a designation for certain programs who serve students with intellectual disabilities in post-secondary education. And like Will said, the federal government accepts applications to be designated as a CTP. So for students who don't have a high school diploma and they're coming to the junior college, they're not eligible for federal aid. But if they are enrolled in a designated CTP, they automatically are eligible for federal aid. So that, of course, does not include the BOG fee waiver because that's a state financial aid. So once you get this designation, everybody who's enrolled in your C2C program is automatically eligible for aid through the FAFSA. It also allows students to participate in federal work study through the FAFSA. Let's see. So another element of being enrolled in a CTP is that students are exempt from declaring a program of study, but they are required to make satisfactory academic progress. Is everybody familiar with satisfactory academic progress, or should I go into that? I'm thinking. Anybody have any feedback?
I think someone said they're thinking.
I think I'll go into that when I talk about the attachments a little bit more.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on. The process of applying to be a CTP. You need to meet with your financial aid director at your college. They're the person who's actually going to submit the application and be responsible for the reporting requirements every year. So you, as a C2C director or some other designee, are going to write the proposal, but your financial aid director is going to be responsible for actually submitting the application and following the regulatory requirements for the application. So please make sure that you meet with that person and become familiar with them and make a plan. The directions are pretty straightforward and they're pretty thorough. So you should have received those from Will. It includes, let's see, 3 or 4 sections. I think 4 sections of everything that you need to include in the in your proposal. As part of the process, you have to submit a letter to your accreditation body. So that I actually ran into trouble with this, so heed the warning to do it correctly. I think everybody on the call today gets accredited by ACCJC. Trying to remember what that stands for. But you should have a liaison officer at your school for your accreditation body. Is everybody familiar with the accreditation process, the 3- and 6-year process for accreditation? Okay.
I'm wondering if people are muted, so let's give them a minute here.
Okay.
Are you still there?
I'm familiar with it, yeah.
Okay.
We are, yeah, familiar.
Okay. So, and does everybody know who their designee is at their college or at their district, about who their liaison officer is for ACCJC?
Ours just quit and changed positions to another campus a few weeks ago, but I think I know who's going to replace her in that role.
Okay. For us at SRJC, it's our Vice President of Academic Affairs. And in the sample application that I sent out for the SRJC CTP, you'll see the letter at the very end to Barbara Benno. And in the proposal directions, it tells you exactly what you need to say in that letter. So I actually wrote the letter and then gave it to our liaison officer, and she approved it and sent it in. So you might have to do something like that. But basically what you're doing is you're making substantive change to your accreditation by applying for CTP. So depending on let's see, let me back up. Here, our DSPS falls within student services, so I had to meet with our Vice President of Student Services so that he approved that we even apply for this because it was substantive change in our accreditation process. So that kind of fits into a bigger, more important piece in the college. So I didn't actually include meeting with your VP in this proposal, but it might be a good idea to do so if you're going to be applying for this, because it does count for substantive change in your accreditation process.
Are you all intending to apply for this?
Most
okay,
likely, yes.
Yeah, resounding yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Amber, was that you speaking?
Yes, it was.
Okay, yeah, and then Jamlin, I mean, this is definitely something we're discussing and would like to do.
Sure. So the intent is that you'll get this training today, have this discussion today. If you have questions as you are looking at the forms, as you are hearing what Lindsay is walking you through, please feel free to speak up because we want to be responsive to what you need to know. And it is an anticipation both on the behalf of the Department of Rehab as well as the Chancellor's Office that you do complete this application and that these students are eligible to receive federal financial aid. But before that can happen, obviously, the institution has to be designated as a CTP. Once the institution is designated thus, then eligible students can apply. I hope that makes sense. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah, and I will say that we have had many students apply and receive grants and scholarships through this designation. So it has been beneficial. We have seen the benefits, and I didn't find this to be a terribly difficult process. It's definitely it took some time, and it was pretty precise, but it was not difficult. So that's the good news. And then, so before applying, you meet with your financial aid director. They submit the application. There's directions for that you received. And then after the approval, of course, you have to report. The financial aid director is responsible for reporting the number of C2C or CTP students and each year, and the amount awarded. But again, that's the financial aid director's responsibility to track the students and those numbers. And then, of course, finding a way to advertise this benefit to the students, to your DSPS colleagues, and to your DOR colleagues as well. I put a little blurb in there about accreditation, but it sounds like people are pretty familiar with that, so I'm going to skip that slide. I put a little chart here about personnel roles, and just to review, it's your job. I said CTC coordinator, but director, whoever. It's your job to complete the proposal, communicate the CTP information to students, and to communicate the C2C information to the financial aid personnel. The financial aid director's responsibility to submit the application, to report all the financial aid information, and to report the number of students who receive aid and the amount of funds dispersed. I put in there the business services or financial services director or vice president or whoever it is to double check those reporting numbers. Again, that shouldn't be an issue for you, but it is going to show up on their radar that this is part of the budget every year. And of course, it's the accreditation officer's responsibility to send the letter to the accreditation body and to report substantive change. Does anybody have any questions about those roles?
No, that's great to clarify that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I will note that we ran into an issue once we received our designation that all C2C students who were applying for FAFSA were automatically getting denial letters because our financial aid office did not have a mechanism for flagging those students so that they wouldn't get denied. So once you do get approved, you need to come up with some sort of mechanism or some sort of system to flag those students so that they don't get denied. And we were able to do it here. What I do is I send a list of C2C students every semester to somebody in financial aid. They enter them in the system, and then they, rather than getting that denial letter or a come see us letter, they get considered for aid. So that's more on the back end of things down the line. But for probably a year and a half, students were coming to me with denial letters, and I had to kind of find a way around that. So if you find a way before that to fix that problem, then you'll save yourself some time. Okay, so if you'll refer to one of the attachments that you got, it's an outline, and it's the document called, let me see if I can tell you what it's called. It was attached to the dial-in information for today's, and it's called the SRJC C2C CTP Outline. That's that outline document. So for me, that was the easiest way to start. So does everybody have that PDF?
Hello.
Yeah, we have it.
Okay.
Okay. So you'll see in there the 4 things that you need to include as part of your proposal. They're numbered just 1, 2, 3, 4, and then number 1 has 5 parts, A, B, C, and D. In order to even be considered for this designation, you have to address each of those pieces pretty thoroughly. Otherwise, they're just going to deny your application for this designation, or they'll ask you for follow-up information, which can take several months to process. So I think they tell you that you can submit an application of up to 30 pages. I wouldn't be exhaustive, but I would be thorough. So I used this outline to kind of help me start, because I know this process can be kind of overwhelming. So I sent the sample to you. I think it's a pretty good place to start. And I'm not going to go too much into that unless people have questions about the actual proposal. So I'll stop here and just see, does anybody want to talk about the actual proposal or more about the process?
I would say the process for me right now.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay. Trying to see where to go next because nobody had any questions there. There was also a document that I attached that was kind of a grid that might help you organize your thoughts a little bit better. It was called the Regulatory Requirements Grid. All right, we'll spend a minute on satisfactory academic progress. This was a little tricky for us both with SAT and with units versus clock hours. So if you pull up that document, the SAT, the Satisfactory Academic Progress, so you have to develop a timeline. And I know a lot of programs do things differently in terms of how many units students take, which classes students take. That was the biggest issue for us, was developing an exact number. The people who review this want an exact number of units or an exact number of clock hours that this program is equal to. That's how they determine if the student is progressing satisfactorily, if they're passing a certain percentage of their classes and can still receive aid. They want a number that's going to fit all students. And I know that's an issue for C2C students, or for C2C programs. But you have to come up with that number. So for us, we came up with a minimum. We used the minimum. And we said students will build in basic skills classes such as English and math, as well as their career classes on top of this core curriculum. But here's the baseline that all C2C students are going to take. So if you do apply for that, you do have to come up with that baseline. And on top of that baseline, you have to determine a qualitative measure, a quantitative measure, a maximum time frame, and non-credit course equivalent for satisfactory academic progress. Because if students aren't progressing, they're going to be cut off from financial aid. So at SRJC, we mirrored the typical satisfactory academic progress for the general population in our proposal, and that works just fine. Does anybody want to talk about that, about the clock hours, units, or satisfactory academic progress?
And this is being submitted to them annually, and who is submitting this?
What?
Progress report?
The financial aid office does that.
Okay.
So they do that for all students who are receiving aid.
Okay.
They report their progress.
Yeah, and it makes sense to mirror the current, requirements anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, sorry, I have a noisy baby in the background.
Oh. If you determine somehow that you think your students might need a little bit more leeway, you could. But for example, in ours, we said students must achieve and maintain a completion rate of 67% of their units attempted, which is the general population, the college policy as well. For us,
I had a question about the maximum time frame piece.
Okay.
I know in C2C in general, we aim for the 3-year mark, but some of our students are kind of starting with our C2C classes and then are moving into broader certificate programs in the classes. If they ended up taking more than 3 years to do that, maybe it's an extra semester or something, would they get cut off from this at the 3-year mark, even though they're kind of going beyond our C2C scope?
So, in terms of federal aid to complete the C2C program, yes. But that's up to you. So for us, you could see in our sample requirements, we said it's not planned for students to repeat portions of this program. The maximum time frame allowed to receive financial aid for this program is 3 equivalent full-time academic years. But you could decide with your financial aid director that the maximum time frame is 4 or 5 full-time academic years. So I think you have some leeway, and you get to decide what that maximum time frame is.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I would talk to your financial aid director. As an example, some of the other CTPs include like nursing programs and things like that, and often you get twice as much time or 1.5 times as much time as is generally accepted to complete the program because of extenuating circumstances or whatever it is. So there is some leeway there when you write your proposal.
I have a question about non-credit.
Okay.
So I'm just reading in terms of to show academic progress is 65% of the hours. If we also grade our non-credit courses as a pass, no pass, is that considered at all? Or does it still have to be 65% of the minimum numbers of hours?
So, at SRJC, we do not grade our non-credit courses. So I don't know the answer to that. So I would look at, because that's not even a factor for us here. So I would look at your satisfactory academic progress at your school because it's probably built in. They probably address it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Well, we just actually, I'm not sure it does because we just started doing the grades. I mean, they're not reported to the state chancellor's office, but we do transcript them now because many of our classes are part of the CDCP state approved certificate.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why we have them as pass, no pass.
My intuition would be to say that you can build that into that piece of your SAP and say 65% of clock hours and or 65% passing. A combination of clock hours and passing grade. You could probably say something like that.
Okay.
You've got some leeway. my understanding, and Will, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's not real strict guidelines about how these have to be written in terms of the content.
I think that's correct. Is it Dr. Tom Murillo that's speaking?
Yes.
Okay, so I am crafting a text message right now to one of our college districts who may have students in non-credit to see if I can get you an answer to your question.
Okay. I mean, I'm fine with also doing the 65%. I just didn't know if that also allowed for the pass, no pass.
Right. I'll be sure to get you an answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
One of the challenges that we had was calculating how many units the program was or how many clock hours the program was. So if you look at the proposal that SRJC wrote, I tried to include as much information as possible. If you look at the pathways proposal, theirs was very, very thorough. So if that helps you to look at those examples, I would definitely do that to figure out how many either clock hours or units your program was worth. One of the problems that I ran into is my financial aid director kept saying, well, it's not enough, it's not enough. This is only, 20% of what other CTPs are, because a lot of other CTPs were like nursing programs, and they have, something like 60 units, and that's just not what our students are doing. So I ended up having to include a lot of other information about the substance of our program that didn't necessarily translate into units. So I included things like advising hours, all kinds of student contact, time spent on campus for other activities that were integrated into the program that didn't translate directly into college units. So just a reminder to include all parts of your program in your proposal.
Sorry,
okay.
Related to that, are there is there a place on the on the internet where there's a listing of CTP approved programs and their respective courses and programs that they've been approved for? Or do I have to go school by school?
So I believe,
or is there even a list of schools that have an approved CTP?
So there's a list of schools with approved CTPs, but I do not believe the latter question that they provide a list of the courses, just a list of the institutions.
And if I just Google that will show up?
Yeah, I will. Let me look for that while Lindsay continues, and if I find it, I will put it in the. Are you looking at the presentation online? I can put it in the chat box. Great. Yeah. Great, thank you.
Well, actually, I'm looking at the email that was forwarded to me, so I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there was a link for the online portion of the teleconference call so that you could see the PowerPoint. I don't know if you have logged into that.
I don't think I have.
Okay.
Oh, yes, now I found it. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Going on to the next slide. I included here just a list of the sections of the sample application that I created. And you can see there I addressed what our student population is, our focus area and objectives. I included a lot of information about our curriculum. I included a pretty detailed advising and meeting schedule, a lot of information about the social integration. Just a reminder that you have to have at least 50% of the student requirements in integrated environments. Doesn't have to be all in class, but the 50% of the student contact on campus has to be integrated with non-disabled peers. I included, of course, the SAP, they require that you address whether or not students are earning an education credential outside of your program, and of course the program overview and the letter to the accreditation body. So again, I won't get into each of those sections too much unless people have specific questions now. Okay, so lastly, I just wanted to address a few of the issues that came up from previous C2C members when we had a similar teleconference in 2012. There is no cap from the federal government on how many programs are eligible for this designation. It's not a competitive process. There's no age restriction for student eligibility. We addressed SAP, but again, your CTP program sets the bar for your SAP, and it does not have to be the same as the college. You do have to consider conserved students and include their conservator in the process. The timeline that we were given in 2012 when I applied for this was that the minimal approval time is 3 months. You do have to address your student outcomes as part of your proposal, and there was a lot of questions in 2012 about what those student outcomes should be, and the answers at the times were, how does it prepare students for employment, how does it address socialization, and how does it address independent living skills. There is no deadline for these proposals. It's up to the institution to report equivalencies in non-credit area, and I know there was some questions about that, but you can you get to determine the minimum number of contact hours. I talked a little bit about the 50% requirement for contact and integration with non-disabled peers. That's a requirement for the program as a whole, not each semester. So if, for example, your C2C students have more contact just with it, like as a cohort or within the program the first semester and then are more integrated in later semesters, that's okay. And your program does not have to lead to a certificate that's recognized by the Chancellor's Office or a local certificate. It only has to have student outcomes. So that's all I prepared as a presentation. So I'm open to taking questions or addressing specific issues or going back to whatever Will has for the rest of the presentation.
All right. Are there questions? I have, by the way, inserted the link to where you can find the name and number of the number and names of institutions who have been designated as comprehensive transition and post-secondary programs.
Yes, just looked at that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So are there other questions? You will note that we provided the application as well for the UCLA Pathway program. It's a program through their extension services. And the reason why we provided that was so that you could have another model to look at, and we thought that it was particularly instructive when you look at how they indicated the students' time would be spent so that they could prove that at least 50% of the students' time was spent with individuals who did not have disabilities.
Yeah, and again, to add to that, Will, the emphasis from the financial aid perspective is how long does this program take? So we need to figure out what percentage of full time it is to determine the funding that the student gets. Because, oh, sorry.
I guess related to that, my question is, can you have, this is my assumption, that you can have multiple programs for students to then enroll. Some could be non-credit, some could be credit, and then but then the college can then determine the satisfactory progress.
Right. So, yes. So a student can enroll in 3 units, or they can enroll in 12 units. But yes, then they have to. The satisfactory academic progress is generally a percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'll say we use the minimum requirements to equal full-time participation in the program. So if students enrolled in the C2C required courses for the semester, then they're eligible for 100% of their financial aid funding.
Okay.
And then if on top of that they enrolled in an extra career course or, a math course, then they're pursuing their career, but they wouldn't get more than 100% of their financial aid funding.
Right.
But if they drop a course or if they don't pass a course that's required for their C2C, then they would owe money back.
Mm-hmm. Just like
so
anybody
that's
else.
Exactly. So I'm glad we're talking about that, because when I am notified that a C2C student receives financial aid funding, I meet with them just to talk about that. So I don't tell them how to spend the money, but I do tell them the requirements for keeping the money and the requirements for not having to pay the money back.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of students don't understand that when they receive the money.
And you had mentioned earlier it was a lot of your students or some of your students had also received grants or some additional aid, so they were seeing the benefit. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So depending, when students fill out the FAFSA, they include whether they're dependent, whether they're independent, and if they're dependent, then they include their parents' financial information, and then all of those things determine how much they're eligible for. So they can be eligible for grants, like the Pell Grant. They can be eligible for federal supplemental educational opportunity grants, so just grants from the government. They can be eligible for certain scholarships, and then they can also be eligible for federal work study. So just like any other student, their financial factors determine how much money that they're eligible for. But for example, I had a student this year who's single parent, was at the poverty line, and he got something like $6,000 to go to school for the semester. It was the maximum funding in Pell Grant. But if a student applies for the FAFSA and they're dependent on their parents, and their parents make a lot of money, they're not going to be eligible for anything. As much or possibly nothing. So
just like anybody, just like all financial aid guidelines do apply, right?
Exactly. Yeah, all this does is make students eligible, pretty much.
Any questions about the application itself or any of the elements on the application?
I think I'll have more once we start getting into it, but right now I'm very excited about this opportunity.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions that you have once you get into it. But I'll just say again, the biggest issue for us was setting the equivalencies.
Okay. Does it go by, are applications accepted on a year-round basis, or are there certain deadlines?
There's no deadlines. They take them on a rolling basis. They just take them as they come right now. My understanding is they haven't come to a kind of a critical mass, so they don't really have to set any regulations about deadlines or number of applications. They're just taking them as they come.
So is it just that is this program just where you receive a designation? There's not necessarily more money to support the support of the students, or is there?
Exactly. Yeah, no, there's no extra money available.
It's just a designation and allows students to become eligible to receive.
Right, because right now they're just not eligible to receive any federal aid.
Right.
If they don't have a high school diploma.
Right. And then, so the C2C criteria applies to the students still. So it's the same criteria, right, of who is actually eligible? Because they have to be C2C students,
yeah,
or?
So yes, they have to be enrolled in C2C.
Okay.
So, but to answer your question, it kind of does make them eligible for more money, because if they're, like, let's say a student has a high school diploma, in order to get their maximum financial aid, they have to enroll in 12 units. So if they're part of C2C, all they have to do is be full-time enrolled in C2C. They don't have to be full-time enrolled in 12 units. So you get to set what full-time is.
I have a question, and I'm not really sure exactly. I don't know if you would know the answer, but like you were talking about before, that the other CTPs, like there was maybe a nursing program or something like that. So multiple colleges could have multiple comprehensive transition programs, depending on the program. So C2C would have one, and then let's just say you could apply for another one, just do the whole paperwork for a different program.
Right, and like Will put in the notes there in the chat that if you're part of a multi-campus district, each campus has to apply separately.
Okay.
So I didn't understand that question. Is it that if you get the CTP designation for your college and you have a C2C program, you have students enrolled, then we define full-time enrollment as well as continue guiding them in whatever academic programs that we have available, right? But for example, because we're part of a multi-college district, let's say if they do take a nursing program at another college in our district, but because the student is part of our C2C program here at West, they would still be eligible because their home college is here, but they may be taking classes at another sister college?
I don't know about that. SRJC is a single campus district, so I don't know about the multi-campus district. I'm sorry.
So what you would want to do is each of the institutions within your community college district, you would want to submit an application to be designated as a CTP. And that would allow for what you just described, that your students could, take full advantage of, the coursework and programs across the various campuses. But the designation is per campus, and so the institution of higher education, it's each individual campus that is designated. So for multiple campus districts, each of those would need to apply and be designated as a CTP.
So we probably should talk to San Diego since they're a multi-district.
Yes, that would be a good suggestion, yes.
Okay. Yeah, we have multiple sites. We have 5 or 6 sites, but in terms at SRJC, but only one official campus.
Questions from others? I hope the silence doesn't mean that you are there looking into the headlights here. We are here to help you with this process, and as Lindsay indicated, she is willing to answer any questions you may have beyond today's call. Typically what we find is, as someone indicated, when you begin completing this application, you may then have questions. As you begin interfacing with the U.S. Department of Education about this, you may then also have questions, and we will provide the technical assistance. If we do not have an answer, we will get the answer. So please don't feel that you are alone in this process. And the other thing I wanted to indicate is you may note that some of the documents that you receive are a little dated. 2011, 2012, 2013. We checked before today's call to be sure that there were no substantive changes in the application procedures and processes, and we were assured that there were none. So I'm saying that to say that the information that you have currently, the materials you have, are current. Any other questions from the C2C programs at any of the campuses? Lindsay,
no questions here.
I'm taking this to Lindsay that you did a fair job.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll just
thank
say
you for
that
the information.
Sure. I actually kind of enjoyed this process. It reminded me of writing a grant or being in grad school, and it was kind of a fun challenge. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, just know that it's not all work. It was actually kind of a nice challenge.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
You're
thank
welcome.
you.
Dr. Tamuda, I have not yet received a response from San Diego regarding your previous question regarding non-credit. So as soon as I get a response, I'll be sure to send you an email so that you can get an answer on that.
Okay, thanks so much.
Sure. Okay, well, if everyone is okay with the information that was provided and we have no questions, I will give you back some of the time. We were 8 minutes before 2, but if no questions, we can end the call.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.